Welcome, I'm Paul, this is Dave. Today I have 16 Glitch in the Matrix and paranormal stories for you. Let's get to it. Case file number 3040, written by Irish Outlaws. The stranger they called Dad. In 2017, my ex and our children lived with their parents after we all agreed they needed to have some younger hands around their house to help out with the land and finances. I was a foreman at a local coal mine at the time, and had just come home from work around 5 p.m. When I walked in the door, the kids all looked at me confused, and my oldest son asked me why I had to go back to work. I was still wearing my dirty uniform because the showers in the wash house had no hot water that day for some reason, and I kinda chuckled and told them I'd been gone since 6 a.m. that morning. That's when the kids started looking at me and each other. And my daughter said that she had just seen me about an hour ago come in the front door in clean clothes and make a sandwich before I told them I was leaving to go to the bar that their mom worked at and visit with her for a while. Apparently I said I loved them, and out the door I went. Well, after a few minutes of trying to figure it out with them, I chalked it up to maybe them playing a trick or having an overactive imagination. So I hopped in the shower, made a sandwich, and told them I loved them as I headed out the door to let their grandpa know I'd be out for a couple of hours for a beer and visiting their mom at work. When I saw him in the garage, he asked me why I hadn't left yet, and it stopped me in my tracks. I stared at him a few seconds and started laughing and asking him if the kids put him up to it. I got worried when I could tell he had no idea what I was talking about. He swore that I came into the house in my street clothes and walked around talking to everyone and made something to eat and walked out the back door. After I explained to him that I just got home from work and I pressed the issue that I wasn't lying, we both fell silent and just stood there in disbelief. I grilled him over and over again along with the kids, asking them if they were positive it was me and not someone else that looked like me or something. As I searched for a logical explanation, we simply couldn't find one. This ate up about an hour of our time trying to understand what I was saying and what they were saying, and it eventually ended with everyone calling it weird and leaving it at that. So I left and headed to the bar to see their mother, still my wife at the time, and when I walked in, she was standing there behind the bar and she asked me what I forgot. I asked her what she meant, and she looked at me like I was an idiot and told me I had just left there 5 minutes ago and that I was headed home to get the kids fed and start their homework. The whole time I was at work and at home there was something or someone that looked exactly like me in a different location hanging around members of my family? I don't know if it was a bad omen or what, but it wasn't 6 months after that incident I entered the hardest stretch of bad luck I'd ever dealt with in my life. Divorce, job loss, health issues, loss of a house, you name it. So this could be two things. There's what's called a Vodiker, kind of like a doppelganger. But generally speaking, with those, you feel an unnerving presence. I think in this case it's just astral projection, where when someone is deeply thinking about a specific place, like they're at work, but they're mentally at home, that's where they want to be, then their soul can project ahead and just go do exactly what they want to do there. Though, with your soul doing exactly what you did when you came home, you went to make a sandwich, then went to see your wife, it's almost like a time anomaly, but given no one else reported missing any time or anything, my guess is just your spirit acting like you, which makes sense, right? Okay, so your soul projects forward. Does it have a corporeal form? Because it made a sandwich, presumably ate the sandwich. So what happened to all that mass from the sandwich? There's no digestive tract of a spirit, right? When the spirit eventually vanished, the crushed food splash on the floor, did you find it later on like a puke spot, almost? But undigested. Or maybe when it vanishes, anything inside of it, it takes long. Case file number 3041, written by Kick Butt Timus, Sugarland UFOs. Back in the late 90s in Houston, I saw about a dozen absolutely huge UFOs hovering and drifting near the parish generating station. These things would have been 3 to 5 kilometers wide each. All identical, circular, slightly domed, top and bottom, with a ring of lights around the edge, appearing to be at various altitudes. They were slowly rotating. They moved around slowly for about 20 minutes while my brother and I gawked and took pics, then they all at once drifted up and to the north before accelerating away. No noise. We were too far away to hear anything anyway. This was the middle of the night, 2 a.m. or so, but not far from Sugar Land, Texas. Anyone could have seen them. There was a full moon. It was a clear night. I had a camera and took a whole roll of pictures. My brother saw them too and also took pics. I had my film developed at Walgreens and my brother at Ritz or Walmart, some other place. Out of all the film, from 2 cameras that we were both very familiar with, using the correct film speed and exposure, we got 3 blurry, washed out, overexposed pics. My brother was even using a tripod. The rest, we were told, were clear, but were lost. Maybe clouds and crappy photographers, but weirds me out. The reported size of these UFOs is most interesting, but by far the most interesting aspect is that your photos were lost. It's almost like that location to develop your photos was contacted and said, yeah, don't let these go out. And that doesn't surprise me a bit. If aliens are here, and the government is aware of it, they would try their best to not let the public know, because how would the public react if there's actual confirmation of extraterrestrial intelligent life, not just bacteria on Mars, which is still interesting, but aliens here in ships? That changes our worldview entirely. How would religions react to that? So many religions, I'm not an expert on religion, to be clear, but think they're focused on humanity. The Earth and humanity. Is there much discussion about aliens? I mean, when these were created, these religions, there wasn't really any idea of extraterrestrial life. I mean, they didn't even really know what beyond the Earth meant. So if you base your worldview on that, well, it certainly evokes certain feelings and thoughts that are incongruent with the religion you follow. Although I have seen people suggest, like Christians, think that these aliens aren't aliens from different planets, they're just angels, which is another way to phrase it, I guess. But if they're really aliens from a different planet, just evolved and built ships and came to us, well, yeah, that evokes too many questions that I don't think the governments would want to get out. It would cause panic, or even mass depression for a lot of people, I think. Case file number 3042, written by Greek Zine, The Blink Drive. Last October, I had a business meeting downtown and was cutting it close for the 3 p.m. ferry from Schwartz Bay to Swassen. The drive from downtown to the terminal is usually 30 to 40 minutes depending on traffic, and I was anxious about missing my reservation and hitting the afternoon rush. Whenever I get worried driving, I put on my Byzantine Hymns playlist on Spotify. There is one I love, Agni Parthene. The version I listen to is about 8 minutes long. I remember getting on the road, the hymn playing, and then the next thing I know, I'm at the ferry gate asking for my reservation. The hymn was ending as I pulled up. I do not remember the drive at all. It felt like I blinked and was there. No conscious memory of the route. No recollection of merging or lights or that stretch of road at all. There's no way, realistically, that I should have been able to drive that distance in less than 10 minutes. So people do sometimes go on autopilot, where they get to their destination and don't realize. But this is more than that, because there was a time anomaly involved as well. So it's not just that you phased out and you just didn't realize you were driving. Your subconscious was basically self-driving the car. No, in this case, probably just a space-time portal. And probably a combination of both. You were kind of out of your mind, just not paying attention. Then you encountered the portal, so it ported you forward, and you didn't really notice that because you were already on autopilot. So a combination of both. And I think that happens often, really, where people encounter space-time portals. The change of scenery isn't too abrupt. It's not like you encounter a portal in New York City and you're ported to the middle of the Nevada desert. I think people would notice that. But if you're on a highway in New York or New Jersey, and it's just trees on both sides, and you encounter a portal, you go 2 miles ahead, you might not really notice. Yeah, the cars change and stuff, but outside of that, the scenery is still close enough that you don't pay attention. And I think this could apply the same way to downtown. If you're, buildings, if you're specifically focused on a building, you'd notice. But if you're just driving ahead, not really paying too much attention, yeah, you could definitely just not even realize. Case file number 3043, written by M.S. Strodil, The King's Whisper. I'm a writer, and I have a well-worn copy of Stephen King's On Writing that I've had since college. I was quoting a line from it to a friend over text, but couldn't remember the exact phrasing. I went to my bookshelf, pulled it out, and found the page. I left the book open on my coffee table and went to the kitchen to get a drink. I was gone for maybe 90 seconds. When I came back, the book was gone. Not on the table, not on the floor, nowhere. I live alone. I tore my apartment apart looking for it, but couldn't find it. Frustrated, I gave up and decided to go for a walk to clear my head. When I came back an hour later, the book was sitting perfectly centered on the coffee table, closed. My heart started pounding. I opened it. It fell open to the exact page I'd been looking at, and there, in the margin next to the paragraph, written in blue pen in handwriting almost identical to mine, were the words, "You already know this. I don't write in my books, ever, and I definitely didn't write that. I feel like I'm going crazy." Okay, so we have some facts. The first fact we know is that you don't write in books. So this book disappeared and then came back with something written in it that you didn't write. It was a short period of time. No one was there. No human being was there. This is a DOP event with what can only be presumed as a spiritual encounter as well, or maybe your guardian angel. What motive would any spirit or guardian angel or developer of the server or God have to write this in your journal for you? And how does it couple with DOP? Is this proof that DOP is not always errors of the simulation? Maybe it is entities taking stuff from us for some reason. Case file number 3044, written by Amber Energy Time. Mr. Smith's last request. As a teenager, I did a lot of babysitting for kids in my neighborhood. Parents would refer to me to other parents. Our phone number was listed in the phone book. So it wasn't that unusual for me to get a call from someone I didn't know asking me to babysit, and that's what happened tonight. The man calls asking me to babysit that night, completely last minute, and he asks if my parents can drive me over because he and his wife were busy getting ready. I ask my dad and he agrees. When we get to the house, the street is packed with cars like someone is having a party. My dad is suspicious, like I was making up the babysitting thing to go to a party, so he waited in the car while I went up to the house. I rang the bell and a lady came to the door. She says, "Can I help you?" I tell her I'm there to babysit and she says something like, "Oh, she must have forgotten to cancel. You won't be needed tonight." Now I'm really confused. I told the lady that I had just talked to Mr. Smith, I don't remember his real name, an hour ago, and he had asked me to come over. That's when she tells me Mr. Smith died a few days prior, and this was his wake. My jaw hit the floor. I didn't know what to say. My brain couldn't comprehend what she was telling me. I said, "But I just talked to him." I think the lady thought I was trying to play a prank or something and just closed the door on me. I was still totally bewildered when I got back to the car. I told my dad what happened. I can't remember his reaction. The whole incident was so bizarre. I'm kinda creeped out writing about it. The only reasonable explanation I can come up with was that someone from school called me and impersonated Mr. Smith. If so, it wasn't a very funny prank, and no one ever mentioned it to me or took responsibility for the prank. I feel bad for the grieving woman that answered the door that night. I hope it wasn't Mrs. Smith. I don't think it's a prank, purely because of the reasoning you gave at the end where a prank involves messing with someone's mind or scaring them in some cases. I prefer just gaslighting them, mind fricks. But then you need the payoff where you reveal that it was a prank. If you don't do that, I don't know, there's no benefit to doing it. Yeah, you get to appreciate their wild reaction, but in this case, they weren't even observing you, presumably, right? No one was around from your school or anything. So, no, I do think it's a case where the spirit was just not fully aware of the time, and it makes you wonder, if you are a ghost, you die, you become a ghost, a part of you anyway is a fragment, you wouldn't be fully aware of what happened initially. You would be befuddled, dazed, in a haze of misunderstanding and confusion. Case file number 3045, written by No Folks Allowed Inside. Love, Pride, and a Last Goodbye. I woke up feeling dread, and I knew I needed to get out of bed ASAP. As I roll off the bed, my ceiling fan, huge, heavy, comes pummeling down, electrical wires everywhere, and the lights flickering like crazy after it hits the bed. I imagine my subconscious might have picked up on the tiny sounds of the ceiling fan becoming loose, but it was still really eerie that I woke up and rolled away because that ceiling fan would have fallen right on my face and probably killed me. Well, maybe not killed, but at least given me a concussion. Another story. I was sitting in bed one night and got chills, and I swear I felt someone's hand. I liked it, but the feeling went away, and I just started bawling my eyes out. I felt so sad, and I didn't know why. I tried my best to sleep. The next day, I found out my best friend fell out of a car and slipped into a coma, dying around the time I started crying the previous night. I told no one about this, but it's a major factor into why I believe in spirits or something after we die. Her last text to me was, "I'll be fine, love you, I'm so proud of you," sent a few days before the accident when I got my first job. Despite having a wonderful life and being married now, not a week goes by I don't think of my friend and our long conversation. My wife printed out a picture of her for our memory wall. I have an amazing wife. Yeah, that second spider sense, I would call it, in terms of the fan and all that, I think it's deeper than just your subconscious picking up on the faint noise of the wiring or screws being loose in the ceiling fan. It could just be that. Our subconscious is incredibly powerful, but I think there is a layer deeper than that, where information is available on a level that is more than just sight or sound. And if that information can be accessed by our subconscious or fed into it for some reason by a guardian angel perhaps, then yeah, you can react to things like Spider-Man would, or even beyond. Also, your wife does sound amazing. Congrats. Case file number 3046, written by Iono 1634, The Casual Ghost. Years ago, my older daughter and I were in our living room. From there, you can see straight down a hallway with the bedroom at the end to the right, and the entryway to the left. My youngest, who was a toddler at the time, was sleeping in the room, the one at the end of the hall. The door was shut because we were going to watch a movie. Before starting the movie, my husband decides he's going to walk down to the corner store to get us some drinks, maybe a 2 or 3 minute walk one way. My older daughter and I are conversing in the living room. Her and I both look over as my husband opens their bedroom door and goes in, closing it behind him. Okay, he must be checking on our younger children before leaving. Within another minute or so, we hear the front door open, and in walks my husband, with the bag from the corner store. My eldest daughter and I looked at each other and shook, and I went to check my kids' room. Nobody, nothing. But my daughter and I both swear we saw him go in there casually right before walking in the house. No bad feelings like I've had with some past paranormal experiences. No other weirdness. But it was bizarre, and we have no idea how to explain it. Case file number 3047, written by Dusty, Centered in Silence. I was at the funeral home. My mom passed away when my daughter was 3 weeks old, so I had to bring my baby bottle heater to the funeral home during the open casket period, which lasted 3 days. On the last day, I couldn't find the plastic ring that goes with it. It keeps the steam in the heater. I looked everywhere. The employees of the funeral home looked too. We even checked in the trash. Nothing. About 3 months later, I went shopping with a friend. When we got back to my place, I opened my car's trunk to get my purchases. There, perfectly centered on the bags, was the plastic ring. It's impossible that it was stuck somewhere in the trunk, because the last time I had it in my possession was in the funeral home. It was a hatchback car, and we had filled and emptied the trunk multiple times after the funerals, so it would have fallen way before. I love to believe it was a sign from my mom. Case file number 3048, written by Eman G. Fate in the Heat of August. Months before my father passed away, I would get this horrible feeling that something was going to happen to him, and it was always only on Monday that I would feel this way. Only Monday, and what felt like every Monday. To the point where, while at work, I would step away for a minute to give him a call. I never admitted to him the reason for my call. I would always tell him I just wanted to say hi and to see how his day was going. In reality, I wanted to hear his voice and make sure he was okay. Well, on one particular Monday, I surprisingly felt great. Unlike every other Monday, I found myself to finally not have a case of the Monday blues. The difference in my own mood was so noticeable that at one point that morning I thought to myself, what if today is the day that my dad actually passes away? To which I chuckled it off as a crazy, intrusive thought. Later that afternoon, my cell rang. It was my cousin. Which was odd because he never called me when he knew I was at work. As I'm about to answer, a second intrusive thought entered my mind. What if this is the phone call that tells me my dad has passed? Again, I shook it off. It was mid-August in the South. My dad worked in construction. Turns out, he had had a heart attack. The ambulance was called, and he was rushed to the hospital. He never made it. A coworker of his went through his phone and called the first contact he found with our last name, my cousin. Thus the reason for him calling me on that Monday afternoon. Again, that's a deeper second sense of information, maybe even accessing into the multiverse of seeing, okay, this event happens very frequently, and the copies of you are all sharing this information back and forth. It's like a gut feeling. So not in every single universe does this happen to your dad, but in enough of them that the effect and the emotion is transmitted as information to you via this feeling, and you can't explain it beyond that. And it's okay, you don't really have to, but I am very sorry for your loss. Case file number 3049, written by Our Butterscotch 78. Dreams Between the Living. This happened to my mom when she was in college. One Saturday after a night out with her friends, they crashed at one of the sorority houses. My mom and her best friend at the time, we'll call her Jenny, took the pull-out couch in the living room, pretty close to one of the doors that led outside. In the middle of the night, my mom felt the corner of the bed sink, as if someone was sitting down. Since it was a sorority house on a Saturday night, there was no reason to think twice. Someone probably got home late and was taking their shoes off, so she didn't even bother opening her eyes. A bit of backstory. Jenny's fiancé had been in the army and was killed a year or two prior. Their wedding would have been a few months after he was scheduled to return from deployment, but he never made it home. The next morning, Jenny started to tell my mom about the dream she had the night before. Her fiancé had visited and sat down right on the corner of the bed. She said hours passed as they reminisced, all while they sat together on that pull-out mattress. Eerie and bittersweet. Case file number 3050, written by LOL Fluckno. When the Men Heard Nothing. A few years ago, at like 6 a.m., my mom and I heard a woman shriek loudly, and there was a feeling of complete and utter terror around it too. We were worried that someone was in trouble, so after we stepped outside and couldn't find anyone, we called 911. It was a weekday, so everyone in the house was up at the time getting ready for school. Neither of my brothers or my dad heard a scream. A couple of police officers had been sent to do a check and stopped by our house when they didn't find anything, to take statements. One of our next-door neighbors, a grumpy but sweet mother of 3, came out to ask if it was one of us who screamed earlier, and if we were okay. She ended up giving a statement to the cops too. After I got home from school, more cops were around the neighborhood, so I thought they found something, but it turns out that they'd gone to another neighborhood after speaking with us to ask if they heard anything. And since she did, they kept asking around, and ended up coming back around the end of the day because women from my neighborhood had been reporting the scream all day. The cops never found out who screamed, only that the only people who heard it were women, including an elderly neighbor a few doors down who had been completely deaf for over a decade and did not own or have access to any hearing aids or listening devices. Not a single male heard it, even when they were standing right beside a woman who'd heard it loudly and in full force. Oh yes, this is a very unique story. Yeah, you have signals or noises that not everyone hears, like the hum, where it's a low rumble, but not many people can hear it. In this case, specifically just men. To my knowledge, there isn't really a difference in hearing between men and women. Like, as you get older, your hearing for the higher pitch range shrinks, so you can't hear higher pitch noises as much. But yeah, between men and women, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe women can pick up higher pitches, generally speaking, and I guess I would explain it. But I don't think that's the case. And if that isn't the case, then yeah, I have no idea. Some entity, like a banshee, that was able to influence directly into the minds of people without creating a actual sound wave, just was interfacing with your mind almost telepathically, but only for women. What's the point? Why did they want to scare the women? I don't know. Very strange event. Case file number 3051, written by Anonymous. The Toy That Flew. This was in the late 90s. We lived in this huge house in Nevada that was built in the 60s and had a strange history. There was a gigantic family room with a bar area and an exit to the side yard. I was in the family room alone one day and sensed I was being watched. This was a very common feeling in this house, and my mom and I had already had some creepy experiences, but I didn't see anyone around. I was completely alone. Out of nowhere, this toy flies at me from behind the bar area as if someone had thrown it at me. Angry because it almost hit me, I called out for my brother thinking he was messing with me. He responds, coming in behind me through the patio door to the side yard. He had been playing outside. The toy had literally come from the opposite direction, so it wasn't him. I tell him what happened and we look behind the bar area together. There's no one there. But the toy was still on the floor, evidence that I hadn't imagined it at all. To this day, we still have no logical explanation except that the guy who died there wanted to get our attention. Case file number 3052, written by Marzipan Dreamer. The Man in the Dead Shirt. This is a memory from 2012. I was traveling a lot then, backpacking and sleeping in the woods and whatnot. I found myself on Maui for a month and a half. It was January, pitch black evening, and I got on the bus to get back to my campsite. The fluorescent lights inside were irritating me. I glanced at an old deadhead getting on at the next stop. You know, jolly and wearing a Grateful Dead shirt with the bears. I looked away again for a while. I was lost in some other thoughts and conversations. The bus stopped again. I looked up. The same deadhead boarded the bus. I thought it was weird and brushed it off. But this kept happening. Every time the bus stopped and I paused to glance upwards, I saw this same old hippie get on the bus through the same front entrance. The thought passed my mind. He was getting off at every stop and running to get to the next one as some sort of prank. But this would not have been very likely due to the distance between stops. Not even a young in-shape person could pull that off. I never saw him out of breath or anything. I don't remember if I ever saw him get off the bus either, though I wasn't of the mind to track this guy out of politeness, shyness, and the fact that I was preoccupied. The exit would have been behind me, but the bus didn't multiply with the same old hippies with the dead shirts, just the same guy. Is this a Grateful Dead thing? Maui thing? I don't know much about either. You know, if I were you, and I'm introverted enough, maybe I wouldn't, but I think the best idea in this case is just to go ask the bus driver if he also noticed that the same man was coming on again and again. Were you stuck in a time loop and only you had perception of it? Case file number 3053, written by Phillips, The Soul Drinker. Me and an ex of mine lived in a renovated portion of his parents' basement. He had told me throughout his life that he felt like he met something very evil when he was around 8 or 10 years old, and somehow whatever that presence was had attached to his soul and continued to torment him throughout his life. He mentioned that he would have sleep paralysis nightmares where he was fully conscious, in a fetal position in his bed with this figure floating over him, slowly sucking his soul and filling him full of dread and fear with each inch that it grew closer to him. He mentioned that it was like a black, void creature that had no definitive shape. It was like wisps of clouds and vapor that hovered over him. And more than anything, what he always remembered was this deep violet, low-lit orb that was centered within it. There were many nights that I was awakened by him eventually screaming himself awake from these night terrors, where he always said it was the same thing. I just remember there was also something so visceral about the fear that took over his eyes when he told me about this the first time. I'm not one to easily give in to stories like that, so I always found myself a bit skeptical. But talking about that presence elicited such a deep and harrowing fear within this man's eyes and voice that I truly felt it. We were asleep in his bed one night, down in the basement, and he always slept in the dark due to no windows, but used a tiny nightlight that we kept in a more closed-off portion of the basement, where it barely illuminated our room and allowed us to sleep. We always slept just about naked due to how hot it would get in the basement, but I woke up on my side facing him one night, and I remember just absolutely freezing. I looked over at him, and he was curled into a fetal position facing me and absolutely shivering too. I looked closer, and his eyes were dead white, staring into my soul with the same fear. Then he just slowly looked to the direction over his shoulder, and that's when I saw it. The exact figure that he had told me about so much throughout his life. I could see clear as day, ominously hovering over him, black wisps and vapor with that deep violet orb bouncing slowly within. It truly felt like there was a black hole or vacuum that was pulling him towards it. It had no interest in me, but I felt the void of it sucking him away as I watched. I went to scream and realized I was having a sleep paralysis dream, and violently began to freak out until eventually I awoke. When I woke up, I was laying exactly how I was in a dream, and so was he. Facing me in a shivering fetal position, when he shortly awoke right after me, staring me down with eyes bulged in fear, and he just whispered to me in a terrified and trembling voice, almost completely muted, "You saw it too." So we know about sleep paralysis, and it is a real phenomenon, just an ordinary, you could say, phenomenon, where the mind doesn't fully wake up the body before it's done dreaming, so you're kind of stuck, you're still kind of dreaming, but also consciously aware of reality. Okay, but what if there are entities out there, malicious, that are maybe not feeding on us, but just trying to terrorize us? Maybe they're just malevolent in that way, and they do induce this kind of awakened state, where you're half awake and half sleeping. Or they find people where this happens, this ordinary effect happens to them, and then they come in and terrorize them. Because if you're seeing the exact same entity, I mean, you were primed, technically speaking, what it looked like and everything. So if this happened before that, I would say it's concrete evidence that it is an entity. But it's terrifying nonetheless. And I don't really like the idea of entities being out there that, maybe just jump on the opportunity to terrorize us when we're in sleep paralysis. Or they induce it themselves, I don't know. But phew. Soul drinking, I'll pass. Case file number 3054, written by Start or Fail. Where the Stones Still Breathe. I was traveling in Peru with 3 other friends. I had heard about vortexes, but didn't really understand or believe in this sort of energy until I had these things happen to me. Our first afternoon, we went to Moray, site of Inca crop circles, each level with its own microclimate. Our driver dropped us off and said, "Go to the bottom, some people have felt energy there." I shrugged it off, but when we're at the bottom level of this site, I jokingly said to my friends, "Let's hold hands and see if we feel anything." A few seconds later, I felt an electrostim coming from my right foot going up my leg. My friend who was facing me felt it in her left leg. Another afternoon, we went to Ollantay Tambu, an Inca site on the mountain. Our guide took us to the Inca baths. It was a smooth, granite rock that was squared off with water flowing on top of the rock, then down the side. He stepped in and ran his finger across the rock, and the water stopped flowing, then ran it across again, and the water resumed flowing. I had no words. I've only seen one reference to this on Google searches. At Machu Picchu, we walked up to the sundial. I noticed people holding their hands close to the rock, but not touching. They were trying to feel energy. I thought, what the heck, I'll try too. A few seconds later, I felt that same electrostim on my right hand, going from my middle finger up my right arm. To this day, I don't know what to believe. Vortexes exist, but you never know when you'll experience it. I did a meditation hike in Utah on what was considered a vortex, and started to have an out-of-body experience. I freaked out and woke myself up before anything happened. It never happened again in this spot, nor in any of my travels. Case file number 3055, written by Anonymous. the last perfect Sunday. I guess more sad than eerie, but I have experienced this feeling before where I'm sick to the point I feel groggy and very clouded, then something significant happens. Also, I'm a busybody. I like to get up early and be out and about a lot. I never really like to stay still for too long. I'm known in my family to be there 1 minute and gone the next. Not in an unreliable sense, more honestly, I just like to keep myself busy. Easter long weekend 3 years ago today. I was supposed to go to my best friend's and stay the weekend. I, at the last minute, decided against going and told them I would stay home to spend time with family. My dad, who usually is either away for work or away playing golf, also was home that weekend. That Sunday we had was a great day. It was beautiful outside, my dad was telling stories, we were all laughing and had a great big Easter feast. It was one of the best holidays with my family as it was hard to get us all together. We carried on much through the night, laughing, singing, and telling stories before I said goodnight to everyone and went to bed. Usually I wake up very early, no issues, and I, without fail, always see my dad before he leaves for work or golf. When I woke up, I felt very groggy and nauseous. It was a really weird feeling for me. Not your normal sick feeling, and when I had looked at the time, I had missed the opportunity to say goodbye to my dad. I still felt very, very sick, so I went back to sleep, which isn't like me. Dad went to golf like he would any other day, and by the account of my uncles and aunties who played with him that day, my dad was very calm and played the best game of his life that day. Being calm at the beginning of a golf game was not like my dad at all. He was always a very anxious, "Come on boys, let's go already." Instead of doing this, one of my uncles is the one who was seemingly anxious about starting and said the famous line with my dad replying, "What's the rush? We've got all the time in this world to play. Today is about patience, for tomorrow is not promised." My dad ended up winning that day. He came home and went about watching his TV. I'm still asleep, which again, I never do that late in the afternoon. I knew I was dreaming still, but it felt like I was around, awake in a sense as I could hear my niece running around. I could hear my auntie pull up in the driveway, and my mom and sister walk outside, and before I knew it, it all happened so fast both in my dream and in reality. I hear what felt like a banshee's call, only in my dream I heard, "Get up!" multiple times, startling me so much I sprung out of bed and was literally jumping down my stairs before my mom was yelling, "There was something wrong with my dad." Unfortunately, I had to perform CPR all the while knowing it's happening, still feeling like I'm in a dream-like groggy state. I'm sure that part was a shock that even though I'm medically trained, I was actually performing CPR on my dad. It wasn't until I felt his ribs crack underneath my hands that I snapped back to reality. I, along with paramedics, tried tirelessly to save my dad. Working in the hospital at the time, I knew when the paramedics stopped what it meant. I felt defeated and like my world had just been ripped to pieces. I went outside to look up at the sky and was met by an oddly shaped cloud. But by the time everyone came outside, the cloud had moved on. After collecting ourselves and our family, we were talking about my dad when my cousin, who played with him that day, mentioned his reply to my anxious uncle. Again, my dad was never like this, very competitive, and often got upset if he didn't do his best, at least as far as he knew he could. My mom said, "Maybe his soul knew today was his day, and maybe ours did too. I felt so clouded and lost all morning. Maybe that's why we didn't get to say goodbye, because yesterday he gave us a day of our dreams. Maybe it was the day of his dreams too, us all being together." When my mom mentioned she felt clouded at that moment, me and my sister looked at each other wide-eyed, and we knew with one look she wasn't alone. We spoke when everyone had left, but swore we wouldn't mention it in fear of seeming crazy or like we were trying to make ourselves feel better for not being able to act sooner. But it wasn't that, and I cannot explain how we collectively had this weird feeling. I'm glad I didn't stay at my friend's that weekend, but I still miss my dad very, very much. I think in events like this, the why and how still matter, and I would still question them. I can't turn that part of my brain off, but it isn't really what matters. In this case, you had indeed the last perfect Sunday, and just cherish that. I guess anything beyond that doesn't really matter. You had something happen that not many people get. Many people, death is so final, and death is unfinished business, like a closure. So having at least some semblance of closure, some amazing memory, and way to cherish someone who loved you and you love them. Just hold on to that memory, crystallize it in your mind, never forget it. That is something a lot of people don't get, so live in the good memories of the loved ones we have lost. And yeah, quantum immortality and all that, maybe your father's still alive, and that's cool, but, those theories, they can't emotionally impact us, because we can't verify it. We can't ever speak to them again, even if it's true. Best we can do is just enjoy the memories we do have. Yeah. Glad you have them, but sorry for your loss. Now time for the jokes of the day. I told my neighbor, I've got a half-brother. He asked, different dads? I said, no, shark attack. Hey, at least they could save him, I guess. My wife was sad, so I showed her my boobs. Apparently, that doesn't work both ways. Yeah, ours are not, especially interesting, are they? I called my wife and asked her bra size. She said, why? I said, no, they can't be that big. A proud new dad sits down to have a drink with his father. Well, son, now that you've got a kid of your own, I think it's time to give you this. Handing him a copy of 1001 Dad Jokes, 5th edition. Dad, I'm honored, says the son, tears sparkling in his eyes. Hi, honored, says his father. I'm Dad. I told my daughter, go to bed. The cows are sleeping in the field. She said, what's that got to do with anything? I said, that means it's past your bedtime. I do love play on words. Alright, video up here. YouTube thinks you'll like it. Check it out. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe. See you next time.